All right, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Welcome, everybody, to the I Know Nothing podcast. Today we have on Tom Giglio. He is a PT. We work together. What's it been, about a year now?
Mm-hmm.
It's been about a year. We're both hitting energy drinks right now. We do not recommend that our athletes do that. Tom, a lot of people probably know you from the athletes that listen to this podcast, but some people might not. Can you explain to us just who you are, where you're coming from, and why someone should listen to you?
My name's Tom Giglio. I'm a physical therapist here at Suarez PT. I'm from Utica, New York originally. Moved out here just over 3 years ago now. Did my last clinical rotation with Pat, and afterwards stayed on and pretty much started working with them full time right as I graduated. So PT, little sports background. I was a baseball player growing up. I played baseball at Utica College. But hockey was also my main sport, the one that I actually loved the most. But those are just two of my sports background. I did a lot of other things growing up. I swam for a bit. Also did taekwondo for many years. I got like my red belt with a black stripe. And then eventually just became too much with 4 sports and also playing soccer as well. But 2 for the main way was hockey and baseball for sure.
How do you become a black belt?
Hi-
What's next after that? I don't know anything about it.
So taekwondo, it goes by like belts, and you have to, in a sense, like test. So the way they did it was very like traditional. Like you have to learn the patterns. You have to break boards in specific manners. So like with your elbow, with your foot, you have to jump over. Like I remember, like I would have, when I was like one of the white belts starting out, you had to pretty much be like the hurdle for them to jump over. So they would run, jump, do a flying side kick while somebody's holding the board and breaking them. Yeah.
Wow.
So a lot of stuff like that. My sister, actually, who's a little older than me, she got her black belt, and they had a test. And I want to say, like, because I never got to it, so you get like a stripe just before you're about to get that next belt.
Okay.
So to get your black belt, it's 2 stripes. So I had my 1 stripe, and then I would have to do another one, and then test for my black belt. I want to say they like not necessarily come at you, but like multiple people are coming at you. You have to like defend yourself and like different levels of defense weapons, I would say. Like a staff or like something like that. Yeah.
Wow. I want to do some taekwondo. I never. It's something I never did as an athlete.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't know that you did all that.
All
right. Okay. Well, usually I ask what you did as an athlete growing up, but there we go. We have some background of what Tom did as an athlete. But I'm curious of like why and how did you become a physical therapist?
So I definitely would say like I've always loved sports growing up. Like for me, like I love sports and I love to work out. So those were my biggest things. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to do something in healthcare, and this was one way that I can kind of combine all of that into one. So I, even growing up, like coming from a family, I have a ton of people are lawyers, a ton of people are pharmacists. Everybody does a bunch of different things. But my mom, I think, was the healthcare side because she's a nurse, and then my dad was always math and accounting. I was like, that was like my 2 strong fields in school, where I was like, you know what, it's gonna be one of those 2. Found PT. I was able to do it in high school, where I was able to shadow for like through this program that I applied for. So I was able to, like, senior year, go a couple hours at a PT place, and I'm like, you know what, I think I can do this. And then I was fortunate enough, I got into a couple PT programs coming out of high school, so then I was kind of just stuck with it at that point.
Sweet. I didn't realize that was even a thing in high school.
Yeah. So there's like, so BOCES, it was like a program that you could apply for. Like a bunch of kids in like the Oneida County area like applied for it, and a lot of them got in. So in a sense, like you pick it, there's like New Visions, which is like pretty much all healthcare, like you're in the hospital. Whereas this one is like you pick whatever job you want to shadow, and then you can switch like halfway through. But it gives you like 72, 76 observation hours of under the direct supervision of a pharmacist, a lawyer, or something that you're interested in. And I needed observation hours for PT, so I just stuck with it because I'm like, you know what, I think I'm good. I think I'm gonna stick with this. So
wow,
here I am.
That's really cool. I'm happy we have that. So that was. Let's just call that when you started in PT, because that's what we'll call it that. So from that point on until now, how long has it been since you basically been practicing?
Practicing?
Not full on practicing. Like you started doing those. Well, let's call it because you were still getting hours. So like you've been around PT since when? When was that?
Senior year, so fall of 2014 to / 2015.
Okay, so you're about a decade of just like at least being around it and learning it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, so everyone I bounce questions off of Tom all day long. Our desks are next to each other. Sometimes he probably gets sick of me asking all these questions, but for a long time, you know, I worked with a staff of only strength coaches, and we had to refer out or try to have a partnership with physical therapists or anybody from the rehab, you know, area. Now I get to work alongside Tom, everybody here, where I'm like, why'd you do that? Why'd you think about this? Why'd you think about this? So, I mean, again, a lot of these questions I'm asking Tom, it's stuff that him and I talk about all the time, but I think it's important for you guys to hear it. One, to see how we interact with each other, but like we deal with a lot of athletes, high school and college, obviously. Can you just like give us your, like, you've been in this for about a decade now. What are some patterns and things and observations that you are seeing, you know, from the athlete perspective of like, okay, what are the injuries that are happening? And it doesn't have to be specific to one sport or another, but my general question is just like, why is everybody hurt?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious your thoughts.
You know, I would say just being in this field where I see a lot of athletes, I would say a lot of it is just overuse, in my opinion. I would say at least is what I see a lot of them doing. I would say like at least when I first started, I want to say just because COVID was becoming, you know, starting to wean off, whereas like kids weren't as active in a sense because they weren't playing as much because like there was nothing to do, right? So those were like more underprepared type injuries, whereas like now it's like kids are back to playing spring, summer, fall, winter, you know, and it's a lot of time it's the same sports, and it's like they're not giving their body a break to, in a sense, heal or do something different or challenge your body in a different manner because, you know, our bodies become accustomed to the same stimulus, right? Like if you were to drink all these energy drinks, right, eventually you would need two of them to get the same stimulus, right?
Yeah.
So over time, like your body kind of gets stale and kind of gets used to that same load. So you need to challenge it and kind of like shock the system per se and try to work it a little differently in order to progress and let a lot of those skills kind of like hone in on what you're working on.
Yeah. It's just, again, you know, from my world, I'm trying to prevent people from at least limiting the risk of getting injured as best as we can, at least soft tissue stuff. But I've been now training for over a decade, and I have watched from when I first started to now where it's like everybody is hurt. And maybe it's just because everybody is more aware of like, okay, maybe we should be mindful of that. The thing I'm seeing is, and I don't know where you how you feel on this, but I feel as though coaches and parents aren't necessarily listening. Mm-hmm. And I know we deal with it when we communicate with parents, but I don't even mean specifically our athletes. Like in general, coaches aren't listening to PT, strength coaches, and doctors. They're just like, oh, we're going to do our thing, and that's it. You know what I mean? You 5 kids get hurt, nobody cares. At the high school level, I mean, I've been here for a little bit over a year, and all I do is watch high school kids and college kids go in and out. And to me, I just guess I can't wrap my head around why we can't figure it out as like as an entire society of the issue that we're dealing with is this overuse thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why. I don't know when it's changed. I don't know what it was like when you were in high school of like, were kids playing the same sport all year round? I don't know. Were they? I graduated in 2008, so I'm a little bit older, and it wasn't the thing. Nobody played one sport year round. Nobody.
I mean, to be honest, like I'm trying to think back of like my high school, just compared to like this area is like so different. At least just say in terms of baseball, just because I work with a lot of athletes. Yeah. Like for me, like I played baseball, but like I said, hockey was also my main. It was like spring, probably like March or even like February. I'd start hitting, February, January, like hitting, doing like little things here and there. But pretty much March is like spring season for baseball until through the summer to maybe like July. That's baseball. And then I still have like hockey winter camps in there to get ready because like you should skate obviously throughout the year. But then like September, even end of August, September till February is all hockey.
Yeah.
Like it's like you get those off seasons, and even like a lot of kids that I know, like they might have still been specializing in a sport and like traveling with other teams, but for the most part, like they did other sports right up until like probably their junior, senior year. Like they would always have that off season from their one sport, at least for a couple months.
Yeah, I think we're seeing it. Obviously, to us, it seems like very common and well known, but I just don't think, I really don't believe that coaches out there in general and parents out there are getting this concept. So it's nice that somebody else is saying it besides me. On top of that, so, and this next question is not to like hate on other physical therapy places. I've dealt with a ton of physical therapists before, different facilities, different people who work with athletes, Gen Pop, blah, blah, blah. the second I had the chance to be around here and I walked in this facility, I was like, wow, these guys are all way different. And I'm just curious, like, let's just keep it to athletes right now. It's like, what are your general philosophies on rehab for athletes right now? Because when I walked in here, I was like, this is PT? And I'm sure a lot of people think that. But, like, now being around you guys, it's like, it's nice to hear you guys talk about the way you view rehab versus the way I think sometimes PT can get kind of demonized in certain ways.
Yeah, I would definitely say, just from my experience of like different, like, places I've worked and like shadowed and done, in traditional type PTs or rehab, a lot of times they'll tell you just stop doing what you're doing entirely. And it's like, I mean, that's fine. Like it does help that healing process and a lot of those. But for me, like a lot of times looking back at it and the way, like, I used to think how rehab should have been done, and it was a lot different than the way we do it here. It's just you weren't really preparing them to get back to their sport. Like, you're letting everything heal and whatnot, but then they're still trying to play catch up because they haven't been working out because you told them to stop squatting for 12 weeks. They haven't been running, so now they develop a hamstring injury or something like that. So I would say different wise here, we just, it like you said, it kind of looks like they're training, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
got to, they're athletes, right? They have to be exposed to a lot of different, stimulus, speed, like, tension, muscular strain, all that stuff. Like, if you're not like challenging them in some manner, they're not going to get better. So you have to make it harder for them at some point. And like, different people are going to have different levels of, skill and fitness and all that stuff. So you have to find like their baseline and kind of challenge them from there.
Cool. I love it. I'm not gonna go too deep on it so I don't offend anybody. But it's just, again, it's a really cool place, and it's like a awesome staff to be around, where watching the way you guys think and go through it is just, from my end, it's awesome. Okay. This whole managing load thing that we've kind of been talking about and kind of been going around it, where we're in the private sector. How do you, me, anybody, like, how do we manage someone's load so we don't have overuse issues? Whether they're rehab or coming back from rehab, or they're healthy or not, like, how do we do it in our world? Because I have yet to figure it out. So I'm asking you what you think. Like, how do we manage it? Because once they leave our facility, we basically have no control over them.
Right. So how do you manage like overload?
Just in general, right? From my world, okay, I know I have a speed stimulus on Sunday with our athletes, right? But I don't know what happens on Monday. What happens on Monday when they go to practice and their coach is mad because they lost a game, a high school game that didn't matter. In the grand scheme of me, it might have mattered that they had a loss, but like, now they're going to get buried in running. So the speed stuff that we did we're not going to get those results. Maybe worse, because now we're fatigued out, our hamstrings are wrecked, and they're running like, why is Tom slow today? Well, you just did it the proper work that I wanted you to get a speed stimulus in season, but then your coach destroys you at practice. So like, I guess I'm just curious how you've done it in your career of like dealing with that aspect of once they leave here, if someone's rehabbing, right? You deal with it all the time. Like, the rehab is something you advise the parent and the athlete, you just gotta be mindful of this, and then they go to practice or something and they take 500 swings or whatever it is. So I'm just curious how you manage that, and maybe just touch on that because I don't think a lot of parents and coaches realize it.
Right. And I think a lot of it is, at least from our side, from the healthcare side of it, is us like trying to follow up, be like, hey, like, haven't seen you in a while, just wanted to check in, see how you're doing, what's going on, like, have you been experiencing any issues or anything like that, any flare-ups or anything, what's been going on, like, what have you been doing in practice, that type of stuff. So for me, like, the follow-up of the communication piece of it is very big. But a lot of it too, I think, in terms of just like the college or high school athlete, is really trying to ingrain like good, healthy lifestyle habits.
Yeah.
Making sure they're sleeping, making sure they're taking in enough calories. Like, even if they're going to run or do something, are they still getting the same good amount of nutrients afterwards to help that recovery? Or are they staying up till midnight, 12 a.m. because their buddies who they're living with are playing video games or something like that? Like, are they really taking their everything into consideration when they're doing that? And that's more of, kind of decide like, how do you want to perform, right? You're not going to perform well if you only got 6 hours of sleep, 5 hours of sleep. It's really making sure that, you're kind of staying disciplined to what the end goal is, in my opinion. But I would say, to answer your question, is a lot of it's follow up. A lot of it's just, making sure everybody's sticking to the plan, right, that we kind of like laid out.
Yeah. And again, it's not easy. I really think at the end of the day, it's probably individual to individual. Mm-hmm. Some athletes will listen more than others. But again, right, if you and I are on a baseball team and we're in college and our strength coach or our physical therapist told us, like, hey, don't do it. You can't do any more running than this. And our coach says that we're running today, we're running. Right. And that's the thing that, it's tough. I was in a college, I was in the high school, and even being in there, it was tough to manage athletes' loads. And even when we tried to, coaches they have their own plan. And I think, we work together. We're in a similar field, right? We work together, but there has to be the other pieces. You have to have the nutrition, you have to have the sleep, but the sport coach is a missing piece to this whole thing, in my opinion.
And I do think it's tough just because, like, obviously they, I would say, like, they have their own method of progressing athletes and doing it in their own sport specific way, versus like, I don't want to like generalize, but they probably think like working out sometimes is like just getting big and muscular and trying to look fit. And it's like, I feel like where some of them just may not have the education of how we actually progress them and what it does to them when you do that to them in practice. And it's, I think a lot of it comes on our end of really educating them on, like, on how they're performing in the gym, or if we're concerned with anything, like, I think they started complaining of this after the runs or something like that. So I think it comes down to us as a healthcare provider, or even like a strength coach, of somebody who works with them pretty often, or like if you're seeing them in a college setting, and you're the strength coach with them in college, and you're like, these are your concerns if they're becoming underprepared at that point. So I think communication ultimately is like the biggest aspect of all of that.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, that's kind of what the point of this podcast is to bring on everybody who I know in the field, and really to directly deal with the patients that you deal with, the athletes that I deal with, everybody, and like send this to coaches, send this to parents, so that people start listening, and maybe we can help programs or specific athletes. But with all the information out there, I feel like this should be easier, and we're making it harder, and we're seeing more injuries. So on a lighter note, okay, just from your view of, I don't care if it's someone who is rehabbing or if it's someone who is healthy, let's stick it to the high school athlete, because I feel like that's where a big piece right now is we are underprepared. I really think kids are lifting less than we were with minimal, we had no guidance basically. What are some things that you think like athletes should be doing? And I obviously we know strength training, but like, okay, what does that mean? What type of strength training? Should they be doing 3 times a week? Should they be doing 5 times a week? I constantly pepper this podcast with stuff that I try to make the person who's on talk about it. So like, just in general, things that you think athletes should be working at the high school level, from the training side of it.
I would say, well, that's a twofold question for me, because like, if I'm going in my mindset of like how I was with an athlete, is like I needed to work out all the time. You know what I mean? I need to do something. I need to be lifting, because if I'm not, somebody's out there probably doing it more than me, and then I'm going to fall behind. So at least to me, like that was my competitive and like athletic mindset. Whereas like now, just from having you in the building, and then just seeing athletes and like learning about injuries, and seeing it from a college perspective and stuff, is that that you kind of need to balance it out with what you're already doing, right? If you're playing baseball or playing a sport like 6 days a week in the summer, or 6 days a week, and then you want to try to lift on top of it, like you're burning the candle at both ends, right? You're not having that much fuel in the reserves, right? Like you think about it in terms of like a strength builder or something. They're eating multiple thousands of calories, and they're taking in way more than they're flushing out, right? So it's at that point it becomes really hard to maintain what you're trying to do, and then also build on top of that. So for me, it's like you don't necessarily need to work out every single day, right? Like if your workout, like you want it to be sport specific, right? Like I just think if you're a single leg athlete, you need to be doing some form of lunge, some form of single leg type of work, because that's your sport, right? Running, jump, running, cutting, like all that stuff is all single leg work. If you're not doing that, you're underpreparing. So anything you're doing, it needs to be in some form the way that it'll transfer over to your sport. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It only has to necessarily be 2 to 3 days a week. And if you're just getting a nice little, burn out of it, that's all you need. Like it doesn't need to break you down so you're tired for your next practice or your next game. It's just kind of get you moving in a different way, and then just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, and I completely agree. When I first started, I was trying to train. I literally have always trained athletes as if I could go back and train myself. That's how I train someone. So like right now, I train. Obviously, it's years of having a little more experience, but in the beginning of my career, I literally thought if my kids are not leaving dripping sweat and like, wow, it was the hardest workout ever, that I didn't do my job. Mm-hmm. Now I do the exact opposite. When a kid's like, that wasn't that hard today, I'm like, see ya, great. And I think sometimes, again, I deal with so many different athletes where I trained kids where they have another strength coach, which is fine, which is great. And those just like you said, communication's key. We have to communicate. But I'm like, oh, you've been training with your strength coach for how many years? 5 years? But you haven't got any stronger. Your movement patterns are terrible. You haven't got any faster. And obviously, I believe fitness is important. I do. But like you said about sport specific, or whatever we're going to call that, you got to be training for the thing that you're training for, right? Like, if you want to be better at baseball, you must be working on your skill, but you have to be working on the physical parameters and requirements necessary for that sport. And I think that's the missing piece. Mm-hmm. The reality is we do have single sport athletes. We do have people playing year-round, and I think, obviously, it's our job to educate parents and athletes on how to do those things. Mm-hmm. So I think you're correct. Mm-hmm. It's already almost been 30 minutes. So I wanted to go over CrossFit. I wanted to go over your current training. I have a big question mark with exclamation points. What really matters, Tom? But we're going to skip that because him and I are going to do a lot of podcasts together. Mm-hmm. We'll go through my last 4 that I've been giving to everybody. So this does not need to be related to anything health and wellness or athletics, but I'm curious if you have any rants that you're currently on in life.
Oof. Current rants?
Yes.
I don't really have too many right now. I'm sure they come up. Right now it's just how people drive because
there you go.
Yeah, just even around here, I feel like people are just driving like they're never going to get to where they're going, and I almost get in an accident like every day. And I'm sure my friends would make fun of me saying because they always make fun of the way I drive. So.
Well, the moral story is don't rush.
Don't rush.
Trust the process. You're going to get there.
Or leave early because if you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time.
Next question there. All right. Same question, but now something that you're raving on currently.
Raving. Let's see. Well, I'm definitely excited that we just started a fantasy football league here.
Oh yeah!
Now I won't
SFFL.
Now I won't be losing. Sorry, Matt.
Oh wow!
So we're ready to go and ready to rip it.
I'm excited for that. I'm very happy. Next year we're gonna have a way better draft though. Okay, my last 2 that I've been asking everybody. The first one is you're talking to athletes, our athletes, or a bigger population of athletes, high school and college. What's one piece of advice you're giving them?
I would say one piece of advice for me is make sure you're enjoying what you're doing. It shouldn't feel like a chore. It shouldn't feel like something that you have to do. It should be something that you want to do. You want to get better at. Like, not everybody likes to work out. Not everybody likes to go to practice for multiple hours and all this stuff. And all of it can become monotonous. But for me, like, make sure you're enjoying what you're doing. Enjoy the little things because, when you get to our point, if you're not playing sports anymore, you're going to miss it, and just enjoy the ride.
I love it. You start talking about, hey, can we go play sports? Can we go throw a football? Anything to do something athletic?
Right.
Okay, now the last one is a piece of advice for the parents of those athletes.
Yeah. I would say probably, depending on, how you coach as a parent, and, I would say just be supportive of your athletes. Obviously, like, you can be hard on them at times, and that's good, especially for athletes, know that they're coming from a good place. They just want you to do better. But for me, at the same time, also, back off just a little bit on them. Don't put too much pressure on them. They got school, they're trying to work out, they're trying to have a social life, they're trying to do a lot of things all at once. They're going through the game of life as well. So, growing up as a kid, there's a lot of pressures, a lot of different things going on. So, at the end of the day, it's a game. Let's not take it too serious.
I love it. Well, it's been 30 minutes. I can't believe it. We'll have more. Tom, appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Expect more. Yeah. If you haven't seen Tom and I's reels, be on the lookout. They're super funny, and they're unscripted.
Unscripted.
All right.
One chance.
Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got some good knowledge.
See ya.